Hey there, movement athletes. This is Jesse Kitson-Abelson back here with another handstand video, and one more specifically about assessing wrists and wrist pain. So there's so much to talk about with handstands that we've broken this down into a 4-part series where we talk about handstand shaping, wrist and shoulder preparation, core, and so much more. Those links can be found below. And as I mentioned, today we'll be talking about wrist. So I always like to compare the wrist with the ankles because you can look at the difference in size and the strength and all of those kinds of variables. We're clearly meant to be standing on our feet. We've got all our full body weight on it. And normally we start walking when we're about 1 year old. And with hands, not so much. We don't have much time in comparison to the feet at all. Our wrist is much smaller. And we need to put a lot of time and preparation to making sure that it's ready for all of our body weight. So a lot of people jump into things with handstands. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know that their wrists really aren't ready for it. So in our video today, we have a lot of flexibility exercises, strengthening, mobility exercises. You want to make sure that the wrist can go through the full range of motion and is ready for that kind of stress. Now, if you want to train handstands, it's important that you aggressively build up the stress and all of these exercises. You never want to jump into something immediately. That's when injuries occur. And you do not want to injure your wrist because you need your hands for so many things in life. This is why we want to dedicate a video specifically about wrists, preparation involved, your different exercises, and we lay this out in the video ahead. We also have more information in our Movement Athlete app. So if a lot of this seems overwhelming and daunting and you don't know where to put it, how much wrist exercise and preparation to do, when to do it, and there are a lot of variables, a lot of questions you might have, this is the beauty of our Movement Athlete app because it's tailored specifically to you after you go through the assessment, and this will help answer all of those questions and guide you along the way. So hitting that like and subscribe button will be an investment in your health and safety and your handstand journey and calisthenics overall. So let's get started. So now let's dive into the wrist screening as well as the mobility and appropriate exercises to address those needs. So we'll look through the wrist screening, which was shown to me by Dr. Dave Tilley from the Shift Movement Science. So we'll start off in a dog position and we'll focus on one hand at a time. So first we'll look at the right hand. And what Blake is doing is he's keeping his hand completely flat on the floor. He's not letting the heel of his palm come off. He's going to be leaning forwards into a 90 degree to 80 degree angle, okay? Now what's going to happen is first, you might feel a stretch in the forearm, or you might start to feel impingement in the wrist with the bones getting close to each other. And you've got to first find, can you get to this 80 to 90 degree mark? Okay, I'm saying one hand at a time because you can look independently from one another. You might be favoring one side versus the other if you're doing both at once. So Blake does have the appropriate range, and you need to look at this because if your wrist mobility was not in the right range, so for example, if you're behind and you're more of this 110 degree and you're behind the heel of the hand, your whole handstand is going to be off balance. You've got to figure out some other way to balance your handstand out. If a lot of your weight is behind your hands, now you're going to tend to have to lean the shoulder forward or arch the body and the legs over. So although your handstand might be arched, it can be because of something completely different. So that's looking at the wrist screening. And now we'll go into some exercises that will address either tightness of the forearm or how you can start to strengthen and introduce more weight to the wrist before going into the handstands. Let's go into some of the exercises. We'll use a lacrosse ball first and do the lacrosse ball rollout. So let's demonstrate this one. And we do have other progressions for this and examples on our YouTube as well. But Blake is really just rolling the lacrosse ball into his forearm, and he can do circles. He can start flexing and extending his hand and wrist. And a lot of what we do in calisthenics and gymnastics is gripping. We're gripping the bar and the rings, and these forearm muscles can start to get tight. So loosening this up, opening the fascia, and bringing more blood to the area, desensitizing it is one of the first keys to getting this opened up. So one side, other side, get the wrist feeling good. All right, next we'll look at a few different wrist stretches to do prior to training handstands that will help get some more mobility there too. Okay, so Blake's starting in the dog position, and he's just going to do some forward and backward rocking, leaning, and starting to get a little bit more range in the wrists. So we can start off like this, and then when this is enough, we'll turn the hands where the fingers are facing towards the knees, and we're really starting to stretch these forearms. You can see how much further back he's leaning now, and you can hold this position, I'd say, for maybe 30 seconds at a time. So after doing the straight arm stretch position, we can also keep the palm flat and bend the elbows. You get a little bit more of a stretch there. Good. And then we can flip the hands over and get the opposite side. So really stretching the wrists and forearms in all different ways. So most of what we're doing is compression with the wrists. If you notice, the stretches we're doing is compression. We're pushing things towards one another. Handstands, more compression. Everything is compression when it comes to handstand stretching and strengthening. That it is a good idea to add in a little bit of traction. And what that can look like is grabbing your hand and actively pulling it away from the wrist. So getting a little bit more space, stretching out, a traction in this area is a good way to balance out all the compression work that we're doing. So as the lacrosse ball addresses tightness from all the gripping we're doing, you can add the traction in because of all the compression that we're doing. Next, we'll look at the quadruped walk while trying to keep the wrist in extension. So as Blake walks forwards, he's adding weight on top of his wrists. And as he picks his hand up, he's trying to keep it fixed in wrist extension, which means he's using the whole front side, interior side of his forearms and hand. So you should really feel actively working as he does this. So another good warm-up prior to doing headstand and handstand work. Okay, next piece, let's go to planche leans. So in a plank, straight on plank position, straight legs, and leaning in front of the hands and coming back to vertical again. So we're just introducing weight in front of the hands and returning back. Because as we mentioned before, we want this kind of range of motion. And notice that the palm of the hands are staying flat. We're not having them, the heel of the palm come off the floor as we do this. That's good. Okay. So next we'll look at doing tripods and headstands because we'll be upside down. We'll mimic what happens in a handstand in regards to the angle of the wrist. So Blake, let's show them the initial tripod. And resting the elbows and knees towards each other. So again, look at the wrist. The angle of where the hand is and the forearm is similar to what a stacked handstand would be. If you look from elbow to hand, pretty vertical. And then if this feels proficient and good, we can start to get to the straight body headstand, just to add a little bit more of that similarity. So again, it is not full body weight, which is why this is a good introductory piece to test out, to get more weight and mobility test, to see if you're in the right position for eventually handstands. We have a lot of good progressions for headstands outside of this on our app as well, so I would suggest looking that up. And then lastly, let's look at wrist push-ups to strengthen the forearms. So starting off we can start off in the dog position and push the heel of the hand off the floor, generated from the forearm muscles, these wrist flexors. So if this is easy, we can start to lean the shoulder forwards more and repeat this action. And then if that's feeling good, we can go into a straight body plank. So straighten the legs out and getting the wrists off the floor. Good. Okay. Nice job, Blake. Thank you. So what we looked at were mobilizing the forearm muscles with a lacrosse ball, getting them to loosen up, strengthening and stretching them out, and making sure that it's a good idea to make sure that you progressively train your handstand. You wouldn't want to go from no handstands into a lot of handstand training abruptly, because that big spike up will be too much stress for your elbows, wrists, and shoulders, and that's where you're gonna find a lot of wrist pain. So gradual increase of body weight training, such as the quadruped walk, the headstand work. It's not full body weight yet. You're introducing a similar range, and we're also looking at, can your wrists get to these correct positions? So again, if you find yourself doing handstands with your hands turned out to the side, you'll want to see it's probably because of some kind of wrist obstruction, any kind of limitation of tightness, weakness, or pain in the front, and you can address them through some of the exercises we just showed you here. Soon after, we'll look at shoulder mobility. So to recap what we went over in this video, we looked at the wrist screenings to see, can you get your wrist in the right position, the appropriate position to train handstands, and then looked at necessary or supplemental exercises to address any kind of weakness or tightness that you can work on. So this is a good chapter to look at for a warm-up or supplemental pieces to help your handstand if you've been doing them for years and you're struggling and want to find some other way to straighten out your handstand. Because this handstand mastery journey, it never ends. How do you make it straighter? How do you make it last longer? How do you get rid of pain? So those are a lot of the exercises that we like to feature, and hopefully that'll help you train your handstands. Really quick, if you want to get started with calisthenics but are unsure of how to do so, I highly recommend trying our free calisthenics assessment. It will only take you 5 minutes to complete. You'll receive a detailed, personalized training program complete with recommendations and workouts you can use right away. If you found these videos helpful, please click the like button below and leave any comments or questions you might have in the comment section below. See you next time.